David Edward and Pat Black-Gould discuss Pat's new book, The Crystal Beads.
Pat, how are you?
Hi, hello, David. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for joining my podcast focused on writing.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Sure. So, Pat, you have an illustrated children's book, would be one way to introduce it,
hmm
called The Crystal Beads. But
hmm
why don't you introduce the book to us, because it's a lot more than what I just said.
Yeah, it is, it is, David. It's very, very true. And an experiment in a whole new territory for me, having never done anything with children or writing for children before. The book is called The Crystal Beads, Lalka's Journey. And it was based on a short story that I wrote that got published, and then I was very fortunate enough to win both a statewide and then a national writing competition, and I went around and started doing presentations and readings of the book, and the topic, which I'll explain, was held audience's attentions, and we had these lengthy discussions that I felt I had to do something more with it. And the book is about a little girl. It's based on a true story told to me a long time ago by a rabbi, of a little girl and her mother at the time of the Holocaust in Poland. And that's the true part. I use symbolism of a cross, of a rosary, and a Star of David necklace. And the child was wearing a Star of David necklace, and her mother exchanged it for a rosary, even though she didn't know what it was for, because she knew what was happening
Hmm.
happening at that time. And the Nazis invaded the country, and the girl then learned more about a very different religion. And the mother, heartbreakingly, to keep the child safe, sent her to a convent, in the hands of strangers, nuns, who then did the best they can to keep her safe. But she was then interrogated by Nazis. And I won't say more about how it ends, but you see the entire process of these nuns who did accept and take this child in, risking their own lives as well to
Right.
do so. You
Why don't
know.
you just take 30 seconds or a minute and set the historical context for us? Because what I've learned is not everyone has had the same education in history, as maybe you or I. So just what was
Mhm.
going on in 1939, 1938 Poland, that would have that would have caused one to do what you just described.
Yes, slowly we were seeing Hitler starting to advance into more, his span. Nazism has become stronger. We started seeing the treatment of Jews treated poorly, and slowly. I started the book slightly before the invasion of Poland, which is, I think, the beginning of September, and through October at that
September
point.
1, 1939.
December 1,
I know a little bit of
1939.
history.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. And protecting children there, because after that, so much happened.
Yeah.
People were put into ghettos. People were having to wear the stars, the yellow stars, and limited, in terms of their getting around, and killed. And there
Yeah.
were few ways to be able to get out. So one of the ways that there were, which I didn't know all that much about myself, was the fact that children were placed in convents,
Yeah.
and then kind of disguised, so that they would fit in with everyone
Yes.
else. And Nazis would come and interrogate these kids. They would be, they'd be visited there. The nuns were at risk, the priests were at risk, but that's what happened to this particular child. So that
Yeah.
you would see that more and more.
That's
So what I appreciated is that the connection of two religions joining to keep, one to keep the other safe.
how do you
That's the idea of the united theme. You know.
now. I mean, yeah, how do you take important subject matter like this, an important part of history that maybe, I mean, look, I am well read when it comes to history, when it comes to World War II, but I didn't know that. How do you take a topic like this and turn it into an illustrated book? Um, Largely, I don't want to say it's for kids, but it kind of is on some level, right?
In some ways, it's really interesting. Like I said, I made it as a short story first, and but even in the short story and in the book itself, it's told through the eyes of a 7-year-old girl.
Right.
So we are seven. And we are trying to understand what's happening. And a lot of it isn't understood. She doesn't know who these men are, but she knows these men are about to harm her. You know, she doesn't know who this nun is, but she knows this nun is about to protect her. So I felt that if I go from first person, and initially I was in the theater, so initially I wrote it as an acting monologue, and then I moved it from there. So in terms of character and character development, I can set the internal feel of a 7-year-old child. Maybe I'm a child at heart, I don't know. But I can take it through her eyes. And when it comes to the illustrations, the illustrator who is Katja Royce, she is from Siberia and then moved to Israel. And I wanted an illustrator who had a connection to the Holocaust, and she's the granddaughter of a survivor. When I heard the survivor's story, I was so taken by it that I asked him if he would write something about his story, and I included it in the afterword of the book.
Wow.
But what Katja and I did in terms of how to create the mood, we started out with color themes. So the color themes are yellows, blues, nice, calm. And as the book progresses, we move into the darkness and the shades, that are dark and bleak, so we can see the book progress through the mood throughout the story. So you get a good feel, and her illustrations are amazing.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
very, very well done. I was going to ask you about the process to come up with the story, but you kind of answered it. So let me say, so I mean, you can't take on a book like this lightly. And even though it's highly illustrated and kind of presents as I don't want to call it a children's book, I don't know what to call it, but what you told me is it was a short story, and then you recrafted it as a monologue, and then you recrafted it as this book. So you took a lot of time to comb through this thing to get the tone.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah. Oh yes.
The messaging, and so it wasn't, you didn't just wake up and decide to write a children's book about the Holocaust or cartoon book about the Holocaust. So
This is about, I started this, I don't want to tell my age, but
yeah,
I started this 40 years ago.
Oh wow.
The initial monologue was 40 years ago. And it was only a few years ago when I moved down to Florida and semi-retired that I decided something more had to happen. But it has been, and as things have happening in the world, other things have happened, obviously, for me personally, that I didn't get back to it. Things have been percolating, and something said, this has got to come out. This has got to come out. And she kept talking to me and talking to me. So I said, okay, yeah, this has got to come out.
Well, and you mentioned there's some relevancy to what's going on today, right?
Exactly. I think that's why we see the anti-Semitism, we see the hate, we see all that has been going on, and that the division is so strong, and in this country and other countries as well right now.
Yeah.
And I try to get across with this book that we have, and Sister Teresa says, that there is more that bring us together than what takes us apart. And if we could accept that, and we could look at that and not look at just, you're this, you're that, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're a Jew, you're a Muslim, you're this, you're that, and here we're the same. And that is so hard to get across, in today's day and age. So yes, I did write it at the level where it is for kids, but there's also an adult study guide in here as well, because in the discussions I've had prior to this, I went around doing the presentation to adults before the book came out in this past month, and now it will be starting to get to kids. But it has been adults who have been hearing these messages and saying we got to do something. The messages is just so important.
It is, and we're losing so much nuance and details about our past. I mean, I can even see. For me, I went to high school in the 80s, and then I joined the Army, and I was in the Army in the 80s and 90s. And to me, that's a very fresh, and I remember vividly everything that happened. But now when I listen to how it's talked about, or I talk to someone who has been taught about that time period instead of having experienced it, it doesn't line. It's been so, I don't even know it's been so generalized and cleansed and caricatured, I guess. And then you go back farther to stuff like this. I mean, the things that were going on, especially in Poland, if you were a Jew in Germany or Poland during this time,
Incredible.
Even the terrible things we see today, it's hard to comprehend exactly how long it took them to understand what was going on, because basically their country was betraying them.
Yes.
Yeah, things were changing in a way that
Yes.
was hard to understand. Now we look back and we know how the next 10 years went, or 5 years, 6 years. But yeah, so it's so interesting to see it from someone with that perspective. I mean, I'm doing a lot of talking. I want you to talk, but
No,
it's
no,
hard to get this stuff out.
you're right. You're right. And the point of it is too, it wasn't just the Nazi soldiers that were betraying them. It was the police. It
Yeah,
was teach. It was other people,
their
maybe to
neighbors,
save their own lives, their
right?
neighbors,
Yeah,
sometimes their own family members,
yeah, yeah.
you know? Yeah. So that incredible amount of fear, that exists on a regular basis. How does a child tolerate? How are you a child and try to grasp what this is all about?
Well, and you mentioned it's relevant. We can't get into politics, or I
Yeah.
won't let us talk about anything like that.
Yeah.
But we used to historically, like when I came up, there was this idea of the good German. How could someone sit through and let this happen? And this book, because it's incremental, it's like boiling a frog in cool water, right? I mean, you walk us through that, but then also things are going on today that historically could be looked back on with the same skepticism around what people chose to do and not to do. So it's an
It's
incredibly
very
timely
frightening.
book. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's and it relates
Yeah.
very much to this book. So the book's been out for just over a month. Is that right?
Just over a month, about, yeah, 6 weeks or so. And
Yeah,
I'm, yeah,
and
just starting to get the word out more.
and and you've got much better reviews after a month than I've ever had on a book. So good for you. I
Thank
think
you.
you're
Thank
still at
you.
what are you at? You're 4.9 out of 5 stars on a ton of reviews. So I mean, this is really
Wow. Yeah.
resonating with people, it looks like. Um,
It really is.
yeah.
And I get such incredible feedback and comments from people,
But
that it hits them hard. And what's really interesting is that I will get parents who are reading this to younger children than I saw this for, because I really started seeing it about third grade and up. That to me, that I think that's when you just start grasping all of this. But there are people that are reading this to even younger children and trying to explain what's happening, and that really surprised me. You know,
it's a good exercise to
um,
go through. Yeah.
it really is. And people, families are having discussions. There was a teacher who was able to get the book just before the end of her school year, and started sharing it. And she was already saying that this is, it's great. This is, and I'm heading to a school right now. In the book, there is I talk about the Paperclip Project, the Children's Holocaust Memorial in Tennessee, who collected one paperclip for each Jew and then everybody else that was killed in the Holocaust, which ended up being 11 million. They've now connected up to 33 million. And there was a movie made about it, and there was a book written about it. And these kids have been studying the Holocaust regularly. So I'm heading back there
Interesting.
to be able to read the story to the kids at that school in September, and I'm really excited to be doing that.
Is there any moment that jumps out at you since this book's come out? Anything that surprised you, or any one or interaction that really stands out in your mind?
Um, the mix of support, the tears. I think when people see
Yeah.
that what human beings are capable of,
Yeah.
at times, sadly, but also the hope.
Yeah.
The incredible hope that we have, that we are better than this and we can remain better than this, but that this message needs to continue to resonate, because if we don't watch it, you know
Yeah.
we want to say the words never again, and at times part of me always wants to write, I wrote this so that we can say never again. We're at the verge of never again
Yeah.
happening.
I know.
So we can't quite say that. All we can do is hope that books like this, that more material that gets out. There's a a CNN anti-Semitism show that is going to be coming up next week. There is Ken Burns, and we're not just talking Jews. We're talking all various different groups that are suffering.
Right.
But that never again is not just never again. It is never again for Jews, but it's never again for everybody
Everybody, yeah, absolutely,
right
absolutely.
now.
So,
Yeah.
it's a very particular medium that you chose with to illustrate it the way you did. But if someone else felt like they had a life journey or a life lesson or something that they wanted to get out and get on paper, and they felt this was the best format, for with the illustrator and all of that work, what advice would you have for them?
Find an illustrator that you resonate with, that really you connect. I went for a specific search when I realized I wasn't connecting with other people, and I realized I wanted to get my message across. So see if whatever the message of your book is, and it could be a small little thing, can that illustrator resonate with more than the words on their book? Is there a connection? Koch's connection made the artwork in this book breathe and come to life. Because
they become a true partner, right? I mean,
they become a part, which is very interesting because she doesn't speak English. So, and so we became a partner with two different languages, but her ability to to translate everything, we were able to go back and forth that way with very limited English, but her heart and soul, she couldn't wait. She said when she found, when I asked her to do this, it really touched her heart because she has been waiting, to do a project on the Holocaust.
Oh, wow.
So I know it was meant to happen.
Yeah.
So I would say to people, find that illustrator, don't jump to someone, find that person that you find, you really can connect with stylistically, because also look at the period you're doing.
Yeah.
Look, this time period is not easy to create. I can found a lot of other illustrators. I wanted a style that went back in time. You have to be somewhere and unique. She went back in time, which is also very unique. So make sure they can capture the era, the time, make sure they can capture the characters and the characters' development through it. Because the hardest thing was like, okay, I can write plays, I can write my novels, I can write that. I'm in control. You're turning something over to someone. It's a little hard to give up control, but in a way, after we started, I didn't feel like that. Once her and I met, we knew we were balanced.
Right.
We were on the same wavelength.
Right. Interesting. I think that's really good advice. All right, Pat. Thank you very much. The book is The Crystal Beads. It's available on Amazon. Is it available everywhere else too? Or
everywhere? Yeah.
Everywhere
else. Yeah.
Okay.
And hopefully in more libraries soon.
All right. Wonderful. I wish you nothing but success, and I hope the book resonates and continues to get, remind us some very important lessons about our very recent past.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, David. It was a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. Please consider hitting the subscribe button.